All right, ladies and gents, welcome to the show. This is Trooth Tellers. I'm Brendan D. Murphy, co-founder of Global Freedom Movement with Amy Devlin. And tonight we are going to be chatting with Eliahi Priest, who is doing arguably the most interesting, I guess you could call it whistleblowing type work in the, what kind of arena would you call this, Mel?
Well, it is an intelligence arena, politics, intelligence, international relations. It involves all of those, but it's an interesting interconnectedness of different subjects, which I look forward to going into with you tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been hanging out to do that, and we really are going to get stuck into it. I'm going to give Eliahi the floor. Basically, the idea here is to extract as much information as possible from him on the most pertinent subjects, because what he's doing right now is really, really, really significant. And that's really why big acknowledgement, actually, quite frankly, mate. Really, I love what you're doing. It's right up my alley. And I just, if I could be there in the trenches doing it with you, man, I would be. So
well, you are right now. This is it. This is part of the process. So every interview we do, every little step helps, and this has been a grind. It's still a grind. I mean, we're not by any measure getting massive traction yet in terms of the gorilla and kitten YouTubes. Kittens are a very hard competition on YouTube, so we
you got to bring the goods, mate.
However, we at the same time, a lot of what we're doing is behind the scenes, and we have set major precedents against some very powerful organisations and individuals and governments and so on and so forth. So I will look forward to sharing all that since the release of what we're calling InsigniaGate. So we'll be focusing on InsigniaGate, I think, more than anything else. But InsigniaGate does touch everything, so it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we'll weave all the relevant bits into the InsigniaGate thread. So, mate, if you don't mind, can you give our audience a little bit of a background? Who are you? What is your background? And, maybe touch on your security clearance and that kind of thing along the way.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Great questions, by the way, particularly, and we'll finish up with the security clearance.
Cool.
So, pretty ordinary guy growing up. We're all simply human beings. I, in my late teenage years and early 20s, really looked at the crucible of the problems on Earth. I was a bit of a philosopher. I became a little bit of a hippie as well and looked at the alternative side of life considerably. And then moved to and did some interesting company work, which gave me great business acumen. But then moved to Scotland. And I was just basically being a waiter and doing landscaping in Scotland. However, at the same time, I decided to set up my own business in sustainable energy. And when I say sustainable energy, it was more so in the Nikola Tesla style sustainable energy and not the solar, wind, wave power, which are all governed by the same law of thermodynamics that combustion technology is governed by. And during the process of that, probably what gave me my most credibility and the best contacts in the world stage was my relationship with Dr. Carol Rosen, who a lot of people will know from the Disclosure Project, which Stephen Greer set up. And she talked about her study with Dr. Werner von Braun, who was the father of space. And Werner von Braun told her we could have had, in the last sort of twilight years of his life, Werner von Braun told Carol that we could have had cars that hovered above the ground in the 50s. He told her that, we had to prevent the weaponization of space and a number of other things. And there was definitely the thread that there was awareness or military knowledge of an extraterrestrial presence. Now, that was a game changer for me, particularly when you look at the technology side of it and the bottleneck of the combustion industry, which we're still facing. So from that, I was invited to speak at the World Peace Congress in 2008, which I did, and then went on to doing some pretty awesome stuff. But really, it was those contacts with the Institute that opened up the guys from the technology arena in the military, unacknowledged special access programs, because really all it was simple for me. I'm not a technologist. I'm not an engineer. I'm probably more a producer. I find all the guys that have all the skills and girls and find the money to try and put everyone together to create a result. Still working on that, of course. But that's how I came into this and started to learn about, because I was so passionate about it, I kept hitting this brick wall. And no matter how hard I hit it, it just wouldn't move. And, through that, I ended up speaking in Westminster to the heads of energy and the energy minister's attaché through Ron Bailey. Ron Bailey was a man, he can be looked up. He put the sustainable energy bill on the table in the Houses of Parliament in the UK. And I had a meeting in Portcullis House with him and another guy under the energy minister. And we were talking about Nikola Tesla. They'd never even heard of Nikola Tesla. And yet they're the ones mandated to write energy policy for the UK. That to me was actually really quite concerning. So I bought a copy of Nikola Tesla's diaries that had been published and gave it to them as a gift and went, there you go, boys, perhaps you should do a little bit of study. So it showed me the archaic Stone Age that the best thinkers in energy solutions in the UK were in, and this is one of the most powerful countries in the world. So that was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
And then we met some cool people and they kept saying, oh, we've got these massive funds. And when they said massive, they were talking about billions and in some cases trillions of dollars. And it sounded so legit because it was coming through legit people. A really legit person who lived in Dundee. Dundee's a city in just on the River Tay, just above Fife in Scotland, because I did live in Scotland for 6 years, as I said. And this money was going to come next week, and then, a little bit of a problem, it's going to be next month. So you'd put your life on hold as a naive businessman, trusting these senior business sort of, this guy was a professor at the uni. So you'd think, oh, he clearly knows what he's talking about. But no matter how long or how different positions you could contort yourself in on the game of Twister, this money would just never come. It was exactly akin to chasing a rainbow. And if you've ever heard of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, well, this was the exact metaphor for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the crazy thing was, I was seeing it, but you had all of these educated individuals who, no matter how many times it didn't come, would still believe just as convincingly every single time that it was coming. Mm. And so after a while of this, I sort of extracted myself out of that environment. But then there's many groups who were all saying that. You've got the Nasara. Now, I have nothing to do with Nasara, never have. I think they're one of the flakier groups who think they have access to the collateral accounts. You've got an Indonesian group. You've got a Filipino group. You've got the Benjamin Fulford Japanese Dragon Society group. You've got the CIA group. And what I'm talking about are the collateral accounts, essentially. Mm-hmm. Now, it appeared to me, and let me just back up a bit. The reason why I got involved in this was to finance the technology. And the technology was like, let's just say 0-point energy or cold fusion. And there is a company at Manilow Research Park who has proof of principle for cold fusion. This is now a hard science. This isn't, this is proven now that the second law of thermodynamics is, a flexible law at this point. Yes.
Circumventable,
which is massive. I mean, that to me is perennial to civilization because what you're talking about is scarcity. So in the last thousands of years that we're aware of since ancient Egypt and ancient history that we know of, because there are hints of technology in ancient history which are more advanced than we have now. Mm. I don't think we need to go into that subject too much, but they've found interesting stuff, like a big pile of rubber thongs under the ocean, carbon dated to well before we knew how to manufacture rubber type of thing. Yeah. So since we can remember, we've had this idea of scarcity, that there's only so many resources to go around. So there's only so much oil, there's only so much uranium. Really, sometimes there's only so much wind. There's only so much resources. And because of that, we have this society based on the rules of competition. Mm. And this is where you get the great push-pull struggle between communism and capitalism. Society presents that there's only two ways to behave. So capitalism, we know, doesn't work in its pure form. Communism, we know, doesn't work in its pure form. And we've been fighting each other over that scarcity equation, the zero-sum game of fossil fuel dependence, since you and I were babes, since our parents were babes, and so on and so forth. So there had to be another way. Now, John Nash got close in his governing law of economics. And anyone who wants to watch a great film, it has Russell Crowe in it. It's called A Beautiful Mind. He was an economist, but also a genius mathematician. Einstein wanted to get close. And now, just to let everyone know, I'm not talking out of my own theories. The basis of information that I refer to in this line of thinking was put forward by Professor Robert Pope of the Science Art Research Institute based in northern New South Wales. He is an award-winning professor, and he's won high acclaim for his thinking and theories around scarcity and around entropy and around the concept of infinity, what he calls the salvation science, which he takes all the way back to the ancient Greek thinkers, and he goes into Newton and so on and so forth. So these aren't new ideas by me. These are actually critically acclaimed ideas, which have very hard research behind them and factual data points, which have led to my thinking. So there's an organized process in my thinking that actually isn't my thinking. Whilst I've expanded on that because I've acted in the real world with Professor Pope's thinking, I really credit my mentor, Professor Robert Pope, with the perennial idea of, you know, this scarcity infinity situation. Now, he back-engineered that a lot more because he talked about how Giordano Bruno, who's considered the father of science, was burnt at the stake for heresy. Because back in the day, the Christian church, the Catholic Church, was so powerful, and its model, the way it controlled power and its believers, was through thought, through consciousness. So if you thought outside of the model of the Catholic Church, you may just well be burnt at the stake. Just ask the Knight Templar, who were not Satan worshippers, by the way. They just looked at the world in a more balanced equilibrium. And when I say balanced, they were more Gnostic. So they had a shamanic, less mechanistic worldview that was ethno-botanical in the sense of ayahuasca, San Pedro, cannabis, any of these things that alter states of consciousness and allow you to receive information and divine learnings without the mandate or without the interface of the church. Mm. And this is why our psychedelics are still Class A drugs.
Yeah. And that made them Class A heretics and basically Satanists.
Exactly. Now, you know, there's many archetypes that have led to the idea of Satan. Baphomet was one of them. I think there were probably fringe thinkers in all sorts of organizations. The Templars were a very large organization. So you always had extreme elements of different organizations, as you do in all organizations. Yeah. Unfortunately, the rotten apple spoils the bunch. And probably some of those more extreme thoughts are what concerned the Catholic Church, which led to Black Friday, essentially, or what they allege that the Templars were burnt on Friday the 13th. They've since been pardoned, of course. And the Templar science is akin to this because their grail was always a science, was always science of consciousness, and a mathematical science, which is why they were the first Masons, and they built Rosslyn Chapel, and there were Fibonacci spirals. And so they had this enlightened knowledge which came from the ancient Greeks. The reason why all this is important is because there is a solution back there that some of these luminaries knew about in secret societies. And we're not talking the secret societies that, you know, have moved into the Council of 300 and the Illuminati and control, power, doom and gloom. We're talking about societies that were secret to protect themselves from the Catholic Church. And unfortunately, as history's moved on, that secrecy has actually led to abuse rather than protecting a covenant of science for man.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is that Newton knew both. Newton was an alchemist. He wasn't a scientist per se. And I can tell you that straight up out of my own knowledge, because I was lucky enough to hold a parchment of Newton's in St Andrews Special Archives, St Andrews University, which is where Prince William met Kate. And I used to live right near St Andrews, and I worked at the Vic and worked on Cheap Tuesdays. So many schooners I poured for these St Andrews Uni drinkers, I tell you. But they had a beautiful university, and I've got this parchment in my bare hands that was Newton's own parchment with his own handwriting on it, and it was amazing. Now, he has a list of names, and those list of names were all alchemists. And you can look those alchemists up. They're all alchemists. So the nature of alchemy is very much what Jesus was trying to teach us: the above and below, the left and the right, the yin and the yang. Unfortunately, with the Catholic Church, we've only ever had the yang. Now, that argument has led into the extremes of both sides now, with a major rise of feminism and man-bashing and so on and so forth. And the yang has been a major abuse of power with the Catholic Church and pedophilia. So I'm not arguing for either side. The issue has always been one where the science has been kept from us. So whilst we've been arguing for equality, we haven't had it because an elite grouping of interests have controlled the power, and they control the science. And this science, I believe, truly could set humanity free. And it could happen very quickly. In our lifetime, I reckon we could have an explosion, a quantum leap of human consciousness and technological progress in 10 years very quickly, particularly with the advent of artificial intelligence, used in a good way, of course. I don't have any fears about AI. I think it's a logical, rational step in human consciousness, and one that can be used for the benefit of humanity, as opposed to some Terminator, Matrix, PSYOP to scare people from what essentially will take power from the elite. So, in a nutshell, thermodynamics states that the universe is finite. Well, we know the universe isn't finite, okay? Because if the universe was finite, something as simple as Mandelbrot's fractal logic couldn't exist. The Mandelbrot set shows that the concept of infinity, these beautiful, colourful iterations that stretch on for infinity, must be true. And you can't create an infinite mathematical formula in a finite universe. It's illogical. So we state that the universe is infinite, and if that is the case, then resources are infinite. And that's a massive step for humanity. So what you'd have, to break it down for people, if you have a group of 100 men around a banquet table and there's only one turkey, and those 100 men back in the day with their swords and their shields have their families to feed, maybe even their villages, what are they going to do? Well, whilst they might want to be friends with these men, hunger and survival is key. So they're gonna kill to get their share of that turkey, because there's only so much meat to go around. And that's the zero-sum game of fossil fuel dependence. That's why US energy security is US national security. That's why the US goes to war in the Middle East, because it knows that without oil in its current infrastructure, it doesn't have security. And so it will go to war for oil to protect its own national interests, period. That's why the energy guys are in the Pentagon. Energy is a defense strategy. As much as the energy guys are a lot better than the permanent war economy guys, it's still in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So that's a really key thing to take in mind. So in an infinite universe, let's just say we filled that banquet table up, turkeys, grapes, mead, you know, fruit, ham. The vegans are freaking out right now. I get it. But we're talking about, you know, Viking days. And then all of a sudden the guys are getting a bit drunk and they're like, oh, this is great. And the musician starts singing and then everyone all of a sudden are friends because there's plenty. There's no need to fight. Everyone's going to sit down and eat because they're hungry and they're going to make friends. And then there's so much food, there's enough to take home. It's a very simple concept. So when introducing the idea of dark matter or the 0-point field, let's get a handle on how big that is. In 1 cubic centimeter of space-time is more energy than in the center of the sun's corona in terms of dark matter. Now, the reason we don't feel that is because what some of the scientists say is that it's omnidirectionally self-canceling. So as it's expanding out, it's also imploding inwards, so it's zeroing itself out.
Yeah.
So the thinking is if we can disturb that field, as Tesla postulated, perhaps we can create electricity out of it. And some have had proof of principle to that regard. And I've met them and I've seen that there's exotic sciences out there, and some of them are in a very rudimentary early stage and others are a little bit more advanced, like this low energy nuclear reactions, as they're calling it now, with the cold fusion work being done in San Francisco. So this is key. Imagine if we had infinite electricity that we didn't have to pay for. Okay, well, then you've got enough heat. You've got enough stuff to power your machines. You grow your own food in your own home. You then sort of stop having to go out to work, really. You can recharge your car. I mean, you'll need some commodities of trade, but electricity is massive.
Mm.
So you're starting to decentralize and self-organize society by setting it free with what it needs to live these days. You know, we're not going to go back to campfires. It'll be a thermonuclear war before we do, if it happens.
Yeah. I
don't think that's going to happen, to be perfectly honest. We've had opportunities for it to happen and it didn't. You look in 2016, the end of 2016, Russia and the US were very, very close in Syria under Obama, right at the end of Obama's tenure. It was bad.
Oh, well, you must be some kind of bigot to be criticizing Barack like that.
Barry Satoro. I've seen Barry's birth certificate.
Ah, yeah. Is it as good as we hear?
It was very well put together. Yeah, we could digress into that. That's a rabbit hole unto itself. And there was a US police chief come out and do the due diligence on Barry's birth certificate. And yes, it really comes into this massive, all-pervading lie that we've been sold for a long time.
Yeah. And look, I like the fact that we've kind of grounded this whole thing. We've kind of framed it in terms of the free energy discussion. I mean, because if you can move that forward, we can get people to conceptually grasp that the universe is infinite and that whatever it is that underlies, the substrate that builds reality is actually a source of infinite energy. We can, people might then have more of an interest in moving forward and getting off the addiction to fossil fuels. I mean, there's no reason for us to be addicted to it right now. It's been done by force.
Yeah, 100%. And then that's one of the major causal factors in environmental destruction as well. So, I mean, there's an environmental reason we can be getting off it. And yeah, I'm coming back to what you said. The reason why I think we've grounded in this first is because this is what was always about for me. And it still is. The simple nuts and bolts. I mean, I've had to create a completely complex strategy to go about doing this. But really, this is what I've been trying to do the whole time. I have a wonderful friend, and he's an alchemist. And he said one day to me, look, El, anyone can create the science. When he says anyone, not anyone, but for him, it's easy. Anyone can create the science. He says the problem isn't creating the science. The problem is the delivery system. And I really took that away and ruminated on that and decided, well, I'm going to focus on the delivery system if that's where the problem is. Mm. So through that, I began, I'll just raise money. And I was very naive. I was even first started doing this in 2005 in Melbourne. And I just thought I could rock up with some business cards and an idea to a few big blue chip companies, show them, a couple of documents and go, here's a solution. And I was so naive.
You mean they didn't want free energy?
They didn't want free energy. I was shocked.
Wow.
I was shocked. But I was very naive and I was young. But it was a good learning experience. All of these experiences that I've had have shaped me along the way. And then obviously coming into the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space was a huge formative time in my career. And that set me up to making the contacts around the world that I did, which have just continued to sort of open up for me over the last 10 years, since the World Peace Congress about 10 years ago around this time. In fact, I don't know whether it was this month or October, the World Peace Congress, but it's 10 years ago this year, which is significant. So coming back to the collateral accounts and why we decided to have this interview today, because I'm still trying to finance this technology and figure out where the bottlenecks are. Now, I'm not just relying on these, almost impossible to comprehend collateral accounts. Of course, I do have my own financial strategies in Central Africa. I have been put forward as a diplomat, as a representative between Congo and Australia. That's not official yet, but I do have the documents, and anyone is free to check those out to verify me in the InsigniaGate drop, which is actually on my Ensign 17 account. In fact, I'll do that right now just so people can see where to look.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm just going to do a bit of a share screen. So, right. All right. So this is the Insignia project. This is InsigniaGate. So what this is all about is basically the documents, which are the hard evidence I collected, which prove CIA cocaine trafficking and these collateral accounts, which have existed for a very long time. Some say since King Solomon, but I don't tend to focus on that. The thing I focus on the most is a $15 trillion or 3 transactions of $5 trillion in 2009. And all of that information are in these folders. To date, I haven't had anyone on Earth, and there has been tens of thousands of people inspect this drop now. No one has actually been able to refute this drop. You'll get people look at it at a superficial level and say, oh, this is just nonsense maybe. But no one's actually been able to have a structured, factual debate and debunk this. This is like one of the most undebunkable phenomenons on the internet at the moment, which is pretty cool. I'm quite proud of it. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
That's
so
obvious.
Yes. So just to come back to, and this isn't just a drop. I've been saying recently, this isn't just a drop. This is a live op. Because some of these folders are still live, like this one here. This is current open investigations and a current phone call with the chairman of the United States Senate, the chairman's secretary of the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And there's 3 of the senators there. We've got the first phone call with Richard Burr just there. And these 2 guys I'll call next. There are 15 or so members on the committee. So there'll be 15 folders here, and we'll start to fill those folders up. So sometimes folders are just placeholders, which are basically just a to-do list in my mind. Oh, I've got to do that. All right, I'll fill that folder up. So in terms of my credentials, that's folder 0. And I have doxed myself. I've put my own passport and heavy vehicle driver's license in the drop, just so, you know, I stand behind this. I'm not hiding, and I present it as confidently as showing my ID. You've got the mandate there, which was basically the authority I gave to the team that dropped this on 8chan and 4chan. You've got the photos of me at the World Peace Congress and my thank you letter from the World Peace Congress. I'll bring this one up here because this is Alois Macaulay Goma, this man here, who I met at the World Peace Congress. And he asked me to help his people, and he called me up several hundred times in 10 years to continue to implore me to come. And part of the story is last year I spent 4 months in Congo setting up presidential connections that led to the offer for me to become, and here of course is the initial, this is the initial invitation from the head of the presidential household for me to come to the Congo. You'll see Republic Democratic Congo presidents, okay, and cabinet there. So it's all in French, but Priest, Peter, Alexander, Richard, which are the same details, and there's my passport number. So that's actually my invite for my passport to come to the Congo. And then, of course, they put me forward as an honorary consul, which basically would make me an ambassador, because there is no formal relationship between the DRC and Australia. So that's why Australia doesn't really want to talk to me, because imagine me as an ambassador. I mean...
Well, I mean, shit, that's pretty much the end of Australia's international reputation, right?
Or the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to ask you, if that happens, and it becomes official, what are the ramifications of that?
Well, for it to become official, the Australian government would have to endorse it effectively. Okay. And that would make me a representative of the Australian government. And so I'm not prepared to be a representative yet, because I won't contribute to the corporation of the Commonwealth of Australia. I won't be a contributor to that myth, that lie, that treason against the Australian Commonwealth people and the Australian Commonwealth Constitution, which are very different than the corporation of Australia, which currently runs Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not going to happen yet. I think it'll only happen, if it ever does happen, as a result of the fact that we've already shifted considerably in a healthier direction. But it just shows that I'm telling the truth as far as Congo is concerned. And so I put those in there because it gives me an element of credibility. So we can touch on these folders as we go. It's a pretty colossal drop.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And that's the thing, like, for those of us who haven't, I mean, I'm not making an excuse when I say I have not physically had the hours in the days to get into this in depth, like, and go through every folder and every subfolder. And it's like, I really want to.
Well, some of the folders as well have, you know, long PDF documents that are going to take a week to read. So yeah. I just opened one and it was 74 pages, and I was like, well, shit, I can't scan through that before this chat. But it just goes to show, I mean, when people go through it, they're going to see, obviously, firstly, they're going to see how long you've obviously been working on this and how serious you are about it. And I mean, I can, as I've skimmed through certain things and looked in folders and documents, I've seen, okay, here's all these different threads that I've seen over the last 15 years in my studies of what's been going on behind the scenes, which no one in the mainstream ever wants to talk about. And I'm seeing that you've been documenting this and saving it all and structuring it. And it's great. I mean, it looks absolutely, it's obviously legit. I mean, you're obviously someone who's really been doing their homework. Yeah. And that's important, because we needed to take this outside of the realm of conspiracy theory and into the realm of actual illegal prosecution, because these are crimes that have been committed, and all I've been essentially doing is just good detective work. Because what I found, and people don't get it yet, one of the most important folders is the prosecution folder, because that was where I took the information through every level of the Australian government, because these crimes relate to a former Royal Commission in Australia on the Nugan Merchant Bank. And they dug up a body back in the 80s, and there was a CIA director's business card in the body's top pocket when he was found. And I mean, it was a massive ordeal, and it involved the CIA and ASIO and so on and so forth. And in the end, they made the wrong conclusion. Their conclusion was that Nugan, whilst they found that they were acting, you know, in an unethical way, and sometimes in a criminal way, they could not find any evidence that tied Nugan to the CIA or Nugan to drug trafficking. And that was the conclusion of the Royal Commission. And so, like any cold case for any police officer on earth, if you've solved a case and you find new, fresh evidence that actually shows that, oh, hang on a minute, that wasn't a correct closure of that case, we need to reopen that case. And I've done that, and I have gone through the process over 2 years and actually been kidnapped for it by 4 police, and that was a thing.
Saw that on Facebook Live.
Yeah, that was good.
You put on a hell of a show.
You're all terrorists. You're terrorists. And I mean, that didn't stick even for 48 hours. So that shows how well organized I am, where the police can't charge me. They can't hold me. They can't try and hide me. They've tried. And what's important is the order for that kidnap came from ASIO. And that's fact. And that fact can be verified. So I'm the only man in the country that's ever been kidnapped publicly by ASIO in 2018, which is great.
It's quite a distinction.
Well, I'm happy about it. So getting back to, just in case we've lost a few people, because I wanted to put free energy out there and I was coming up against a brick wall with money, I ran into these accounts where the accounts kept being like chasing a rainbow that never happened. And I found out the reason for that was because the accounts were off balance, that they existed in this secret world of banking, which runs parallel to the intelligence agencies. For the intelligence agencies to maintain their secrecy and their anonymity, they needed a banking infrastructure alongside their operational infrastructure. That way people couldn't see where the money was going to do what they needed to do. The trouble with that is it got out of hand. You imagine that amount of power in already corrupted people, and they just started to fudge the numbers and the interest rates were higher, and then they realized, well, it doesn't really matter because we've created a wholly separate economy.
Yeah, it's unregulated.
Where there's no inflation, there's no deflation, there's just the dollar amounts that we stick on a computer screen. And obviously one day they must have been getting high, like, Jacob, I've been thinking about it, Jacob, but why we even got amounts? Why don't we just make them infinite? Jacob's like, oh, yes, David. Yes, Mr. Rockefeller. I think that's a wonderful idea. Why didn't I think of that? And so now they literally have accounts that you could never exhaust.
Wow.
Now, they know that you can't bring those accounts into the civilian economy because then you just have Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
The concept of infinite money and finite resources, which is why we have a gold-backed and, you know, we try and have a gold-backed currency. Because if we have trade, it needs to be equitable. So the moment you have infinite money, well, there's no need to go and work, and then money becomes valueless. Because at the end of the day, like a great North American chief said, you can't eat your money.
Exactly.
You might have billions of dollars, but if you can't buy a fish with it, what is it worth?
Yeah.
So this is their conundrum, is that they've got all this money in these off-balance unregulated areas where a certain corrupt group of people are able to run amok with it and carry out deep state nefarious activities effectively. And this is the deep state that, you know, we've been battling and talking about, and this is how the deep state finances itself.
Are we talking also, you know, the military-industrial complex, like deep underground military bases, you know, all this off-the-record stuff that no one's talking about? Does it even branch off into, you know, these exotic technology programs like, you know, crashed alien or back-engineered craft? I mean, does it go that far?
I think so, and that's why I never will officially say, well, yes, it does that, because I don't have hard proof. But theoretically, and not only theoretically, but pretty logically, well, absolutely. And that's why I've always thought, well, maybe even if we can just make this situation public, there won't be a need to develop the technology ourselves, because by following the forensic paper trail of the money and the crimes, where we hold these people accountable and they actually have to say what they did with the money, we'll find the technology and we can just unearth it and put it to proper use.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any rich anymore. In saying that, there's not going to be any poor anymore. And that's the world we're looking at. It's not to say that someone who works harder won't have more. They will. We don't need a communist economy.
No.
But we can't have a situation where, you know, there's a kid who's starving and at the same time there's a guy sitting with $300 billion in their bank account and 30 million mansions and 10 Ferraris, and, you know, that's not healthy either.
Yeah. And it's not because we want to redistribute by force, you know, wealth away from wealthy people to feed poor people. The point, I think, is that it's not necessary to have the poor people in the first place if we unearth the technology and deploy it properly.
Correct. And by the nature of math and economics, the economy will balance itself out by itself.
Yeah.
We don't need to say, hey, you can't have this amount of money, which is what the capitalists are afraid of. And the socialists are unhappy because it's like, well, hey, you can't have that much money because we don't have it, and that's not fair. So, you know, that's why there's been this demented, almost mentally ill political argument in most of the Western countries, and there is a third option.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about here. And that's why I'm also one of the most ignored individuals in the world at the moment, given what I've just dropped on 8chan and 4chan and what I did last night, which, maybe we should lead with that. Just talk about the phenomena of my situation, which is unusual to say the least.
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll do a little bit of a screen share. All right, so last night I dropped this InsigniaGate on MI6. So basically that means that I went to the MI6 website here and I clicked on Contact Us. And they're really serious about your security when you contact them. They're like, be aware of security cameras and other techniques that may allow others to see your screen. And I was screen sharing on the video that you'll see. So I did a screen share of the entire process of me dropping InsigniaGate here to MI6 and clicking submit. And that was just a process of actually going to this folder here. Sorry, the top folder. Well, you just right click on a folder and you click get link. So that's the top folder up here. Here we go. So manage link, and then you just hit copy. So that I copied the link and I wrote a nice little, you know, how you doing, guys? And I control V the link in, even though that wasn't the link, but it was the Dropbox link at the time. And then I sent it to them. Now, this basically removes plausible deniability from British intelligence forever. Because I'm sorry, but as men and women, we all have to be guided by rational thinking and a process around information. And the process that I've followed, this information here, irrefutably proves former President George H.W. Bush trafficked cocaine. Former CIA directors, former military leaders, and former CIA assassins trafficked cocaine, trafficked heroin, and they also used an Australian bank to do it. And this folder here, the prosecution folder, here's all the entities in Australia that completely denied, apart from, I think, the Crime and Corruption Commission. They wrote a lovely letter to me.
I bet they were really pleased to have that data.
What's that?
I bet they were really pleased to have that information and really acted on it swiftly.
Well, I watched the police behave like criminals. And so my local police now hate me because they know I can actually take their jobs off them over this. So CCC wrote back and said, "Dear Mr. Priest, thank you for your email received by the Crime and Corruption Commission on 22nd of May 2018, which you raised concerns about the conduct of the Australian government. We understand your concerns that Australia has participated in money laundering to finance terrorism, financed and equipped ISIS militants, and struck a secret deal to get ISIS families out of Raqqa," which they did. "We know that you have raised your concerns with the Attorney General and the Australian Federal Police, who have not responded. Though we have used different words to describe your concerns or not referred to every issue that you have raised, please be assured that we have carefully considered the information you have provided." And then it goes on to how the fact that they're a state government body, so they can't investigate the federal government, which is fine. "You may wish to seek independent legal advice or contact a federal member of parliament in the electorate which you reside." So that's just one response. But what that effectively has done is I now can prove the full spectrum dominance of the corruption. Because if not one level of government, from Queensland Police to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, New South Wales Police Minister, National Security Hotline, Minister for Finance, Law Enforcement Conduct Commission, Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, Governor General, Australian Federal Police, Attorney General, ASIO, the Royal Commission into Banking, or the High Court are prepared. And this is the thing. So because the Australian government weren't prosecuting this and weren't prepared to, I decided that I had the lawful responsibility to prosecute on behalf of the Australian government. So this document here is where I'm prosecuting the Prime Minister with a High Court document and others, Miss Bishop, Margaret Stone, the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security. And the person issuing the notice is Ms. Sarah McNaughton, who is the Director of Commonwealth Prosecutions. Even though she didn't issue it, I put her name in, her work address, her phone number, signed it by the Great Seal of Australia and her judiciary and put the High Court seal on it, and then said I was per procatum for her signature and signed it. They never rebutted it.
So it stands.
If you table any document that they don't rebut, it stands. So all of the documents I've tabled still stand, which is cool.
Probably a good time for Malky to get out of politics as it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, there's a lot of information here, which we could talk all day about. but we'll just, we'll take it one step at a time and see where we end up.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, and maybe it's going to be really obvious to you because you've been doing this for so long and you've been in it for so long, but probably some people are going to be wondering, what is the connection? Can you explain the connection between the drug trafficking and the accounts, the secret accounts?
Yeah, so obviously when the CIA was set up, they kept having to go to Congress to seek congressional approval for their black ops or for their operations. And not everyone was on the same page. And they found that annoying, these egomaniacs. They found it annoying that these elite CIA guys had to go and speak to some, Southern hit congressman who didn't agree with them. But they needed money from Congress. So they got together and went, well, how do we self-finance? And they went, well, we could traffic cocaine. And this information came from this document, which I'll bring up again. And we'll just bring it up here. So you go to key documents, classified government releases, and the FBI document. So this is an FBI document for former Senator Edward Kennedy, who's deceased. It's July 7th, 1989. Now, I gave this to a friend of mine who worked in the Pentagon. She was an energy advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's a pretty serious position. Her father is very well known in Washington, D.C. social circles, and she had more than ample access to senior FBI figures. When I first got hold of this document, I gave it to her to check with her FBI friends. A few days later, she came back and she told me it was a genuine document. Since then, I've had a handful of other people in pretty high places confirm it for me, including the fact that it came from Lord James, and all the other case files and information of the investigation confirm this document. And so this is where we realize this tells the story of how the CIA wanted to finance itself, says who it was, former President George Bush, William Colby, George Bush, Richard Armitage, and Lieutenant Colonel, who's now Major General, Robert Ferreira. And, of course, General Edward Lansdale, who ran the CIA activities in Vietnam. And that was the heroin smuggling out of Vietnam, which is why Australia was involved. So your question was, how does the CIA and drug smuggling tie to the finance and the banking? Well, obviously then they needed to cut deals with bankers because it was too much money for them to hold on to. So they set up a parallel secret intelligence infrastructure within most of the world's banks. And of course, number crunchers weren't too bothered by that because they thought, oh, well, this is US national security. They turned a blind eye to where the money was coming from. Mm-hmm. And they just went, oh, well, this is national security. We're doing a service to US national security and NATO. Mm. Aren't we wonderful people? And meanwhile, they're on more money than, God. Yeah. So that's how that came out. And then it grew because you've got an unregulated market with power-hungry people, and the numbers just kept getting bigger until they actually got out of control. And my thoughts are, well, if there is that enormous, vast amount of money tied to a science that could help set humanity free, and there's kids starving in the third world, what are we waiting for?
So you wanted to be, at that point in time, there was no link between those kinds of funds and that kind of science, but you wanted to be the guy who put them together, yeah?
Well, it's not that I wanted to be the guy, it's that I've become one of the guys simply by doing it. My goal was just to get money and finance the science because it needed to happen. If it was me, great, but I wasn't averse to someone else coming along and doing it. If they could do it faster, great, because it's not about the doing of it as opposed to the outcome and how it can enrich society and particularly the struggling societies. Mm. Now it's become a justice issue around accountability and around war crimes, because I've realized that until we have justice and accountability around the war crimes, humanity hasn't learnt its lesson. And there's an evolutionary process in that for humanity, that until we're grown up enough to actually talk about adult subjects, which we don't seem to be, because I'm blacklisted by the global media. I mean, so many people have sent my name, and not just the global media, but I've found even alternative media, people that have large platforms. It's strange because InsigniaGate has actually created a pretty massive movement already, albeit small. There's a bit of electricity happening there. There's some viral threads on Reddit, 4chan, 8chan. People are getting the significance of it and saying, this is the biggest drop in history. This is the holy grail, some people have been saying. And when you look at it, when you take me and emotion away from it, and you just look at it for the cold, hard facts of what it actually is. Because not by itself, but if it were to be engaged by the by intelligent enough to actually get it, it's far more important than any other political discussion that we've been having.
Yeah.
And it's bigger than anything Q has dropped. It's bigger than anything President Trump has said. And it's legitimate. Like I said, it's undebunkable. No one has been able to debunk me. I welcome it. I'm actually, if anyone would like to have a debate with me, a public debate, I'll wear a suit, we'll go somewhere pretty, we'll put cameras on it. I will debate anyone. I'll debate 10 university professors, and show science. So it's not about, it's become an almost impossible phenomena now, because everyone quietly knows that it's real. The issue now is fear, because it involves the CIA that kills people and British intelligence that kill people and the Bush family and the Clintons, which can kill people. I mean, I already just had a pretty, loose, you'll end up in a body bag threat the other day. And right after that, Wilfredo Sorin, who was Lord David James' key man, and just to back up, Lord James I worked with on this investigation, which is where I got the information from in 2011. The guy giving Lord James that information is Wilfredo Sorin. He just got knocked the other day.
Yeah.
And not long ago, a couple of weeks ago. So this is still a very serious issue.
Yeah, just to clarify for anyone who isn't clear, he's dead now.
He's dead. He's dead. Well, let's show I know it's pretty full on, but people need to see, because they need to take this seriously. That's so right. You go into current ops, you go into open investigations, and you've got, that's Marlon McCaw. Must be in CIA assets.
I did just see Wilfredo Sorin there, if you were looking for his name.
All right, cool.
I don't know if that's what you're after.
Oh, yeah, Lord James Wilfredo Sorin. And the assassination, thanks. It's a new folder. I'm just getting familiar. The assassination of Sorin.
This is a real photo, folks.
Yeah. This is a couple of weeks ago. This is Lord James's guy.
Do they know how he was killed?
No, but that he's still wearing his suit, and there clearly is some form of contusions on his face. So it looks like he's been struck. You see bruising around his cheek and swelling. He's been punched in the nose. There's a bit of pus coming out of his mouth. This is a murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I got given this by someone in the intelligence community this week. So,
and you've had a long-standing, sort of working relationship with Lord James. 7-8 years or so?
Yeah, since 2011. Yeah, I could call him now.
Oh well, please, by all means.
I'll see if I can. I'll see if he picks up. That'd be good.
He's been a bit reticent lately, I understand.
Yeah, he has. They all have. They don't like that I've gone so public.
I'll talk to you, mate.
I'll just cover the...
Yep. Okay, there it is, Lord James.
He's not picking up to me lately. Considering Serene just died, this is what I've been getting. I'll leave a message for him, though. Please leave a message after the tone. When you finish recording, please hang up or press the hash key for more options. Yes, Lord James, I contacted British intelligence last night through their contact form. I didn't use a Tor, and I did drop the entire mega drop of folders and files to do with our investigation to them, including your name and your relationship with Sir John Scarlett. This is becoming so public now that, you know, you guys will only be able to ignore it for so long. I did get your voice message the other day. I appreciate that. But we need to move this forward. And you don't have a choice anymore, sir. I know, I respect you. You're an older man. You're a lord. But you don't have a choice anymore. And that, unfortunately, is the position you're in as a result of being a servant to the British people. So please call me back. You have my phone number. And I actually am live now on an interview, which is going out publicly as well. So we would hope that you're a white hat, and the longer that people like yourself choose to cover the information up by not talking about it, now that it is so public, you become complicit in it, sir. And I know you're not. You never have been. However, you will be subpoenaed if you continue to ignore my phone calls. Thank you, Lord James. So, you know, it's on we go. And you can find here, just so people think, oh, that's a LARP, and LARP stands for live action role play. So that's something that's been leveled against me before. Mm-hmm. We'll just go back here and we'll go into, where is it? Witness and criminal recordings. Here we go, Lord James recording. So this is just, it's not a significant phone call, but I just thought I'd put it there to show that I do talk to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's hear a few seconds. If it'll play.
Yeah, it's playing. Is the sound playing though? I'll try doing it in a different way. Just bear with me.
Yep, no problem. It's pretty clear. Pretty clear. He says your name a couple of times.
Yeah. So, you know, this is a guy that was put forward by Sir John Scarlett, the former chief of MI6. And I've just dropped that drop in MI6's, you know, secret little hole. I'm free as a bird. Nobody in the mainstream media and politics engaging this. This is this weird, almost Twilight Zone phenomena where it's an actual elephant in the room scenario that you can shout as loud as you can and people are actually pretending not to hear because they're afraid. They're afraid that if they get involved in this in their official positions, they'll lose their job or they don't want to talk out or so on and so forth. So it's a process of gaining traction slowly, 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 so that people are going to turn around in those official positions one day and go, oh, well, this is now trendy. Unfortunately, people are that shallow.
Yeah.
You know, the sad thing is that these people are in these roles because we pay them to be there. So really, they should be doing it anyway because we pay them to follow up and enforce law and enforce international law, particularly Christian Porter, who is our Attorney General. This is his job in Australia. He's refused to do his job. I have letters back from the Attorney General where acknowledged receipt of the intel. Have they done anything with it? No. Is Christian Porter the head of ASIO? Yes. So what are they doing? And if they're not doing anything with it, then they're actually complicit in the crimes. If you stand there and watch a rape happen and then don't tell anyone, even though you weren't the one raping that person, you are complicit in the crime. I'm sorry, but you are.
Yep.
If you got some sick, perverse satisfaction out of watching, then felt a little bit guilty, so you then feel, oh, I don't want to tell anyone because I feel horrible and maybe it'll just go away. That is the position of the Australian government on this at the moment. They benefited, a perverse benefit, and now they know that the moment you get tangibility around this and the forces of government, you're not only going to throw, I mean, you're going to do a purging the likes this country has ever seen, ever. Not only that, you're changing international relations forever. And the insanity for them is, well, why would we do that for this jeweler? For this one guy? Why would we do that? Well, my answer to them is, well, it's not for me, you idiots. Your rule of law that you are mandated to uphold says that you should do that. And why am I the only one in the country telling you to uphold your own laws, you idiots? And now this is actually going through court, so it's only a matter of time before I'm actually having that conversation with them. And I've begun to have that conversation in a legal environment with them. So they're in a bit of trouble and they know it, which is why they tried to have me kidnapped and rendered non-compos mentis. Non-compos mentis means that I'm not mentally capable of representing myself because I'm ill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Delusions of grandeur. You know, you thought you'd been to the Congo.
I thought I'd been to the Congo, and I got the psychiatrist out. I mean, it was literally a inquisition. It was an inquisition. Okay, so I'm in my jewelry shop. My folks have owned a jeweler since 1946. My pop was a gun sergeant in the 2nd 18th Battalion. He was a POW in Changi concentration camp. Good idea. And he came back to Australia and set up a little jewellers in country New South Wales in Gunnedah. My folks took that over in the late 70s. We moved up to Noosa in 95, took the business here, and we've been in Noosa ever since. Great little family jeweller. You know, we're a reputable business. I'm just sitting there one day. I've just gotten back from holidays and 4 cops have walked into the store. You know, I'm trying to do a G-Shock, Casio G-Shock battery and pressure test. So I'm chill. And I'm sorry, but I don't know too many mentally ill people that can sit down and coherently do a G-Shock, battery and pressure test. And so I'm just working away, and 4 police rock up and 2 Queensland health workers, and they're saying, you have to come with us. And I'm like, what? All right, yes. I mean, because you can't, there's no arguing it with them.
No.
But I managed to get it on the Facebook Live, and it went out to 60,000 people or something. Anyway, long story short, I'm then barefoot in the back of a paddy wagon, because that's obviously going to be great for my mental health, ripping my arm behind my back and then pushing me in a paddy wagon in bare feet, thirsty as, all the way to Nambour, which is an hour, 45-minute trip from Noosa. And then I'm taken to emergency, and then I'm sat in the paddy wagon for another 10 minutes while they get themselves organised. And then I marched in bare feet onto an emergency hospital bed with other emergency patients around me. And I'm sat on that bed with the 2 police, 3 hospital security guards, doctors, nurses, and psychiatrists. So there are at least a dozen people in a semicircle. Well, I'm proceeded to be asked questions about my involvement with the CIA and MI6 in bare feet on a hospital bed.
So they know that you have an involvement with these intelligence apparatuses.
Well, no, they think that it's a delusion in my head.
Right.
Because they were too lazy to actually look at the proof that I gave them.
They could have just watched a Facebook Live or 2 and seen some photos. Problem solved.
They're too lazy. That's the thing. They, in their delusion, there's this rampant collective narcissism in that society where they're the ones with the degrees, they're the ones with the jobs, and so they're all these very special snowflakes, assure you.
Oh, yeah.
And so they don't need proof. If they have an idea, it must be right because they had it, and there's no due diligence or, thought process or anything. So the irony is the thing they were accusing me of is actually the thing that they were being. So right at the end of this psychiatrist examination in the inquisition that it was, I knew I'll get you. I didn't say that. I just thought to myself, I'll get you. So I said, I bet you think that me going to Congo and working with the presidency and meeting the king and having a mandate from the king is delusion. And the psychiatrist said, yes, Mr. Priest, that's a perfect example of delusions of grandeur. And meanwhile, I've just showed you guys the proof that I have. So if delusions of grandeur is believing something that isn't real, wasn't it the psychiatrists that were actually believing something that wasn't real because of their own delusions of grandeur?
Sounds like an accurate diagnosis, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Brendan. So that happened. And I mean, to the hospital's credit, as soon as I got into the psych ward, I ended up, I was on the phone to former Senator Malcolm Roberts from the hospital because he's familiar with the case as well and the documents, and he's a good guy. So he gave us a lot of support, and we have a lot of, we're very grateful to One Nation for that, because he was the only politician standing at the time. And so I will go to bat for former Senator Roberts and One Nation for being there for our family during what was a really stressful time. But because of how full on it got very quickly, I was then shoved in the high security psych ward, which the inpatients call Pikachu. So it's the Pikachu maximum security psych ward, and I tell you what, it's not pretty.
I'm sorry, that name is just brilliant.
You get mentally ill by being in it because it's so mentally ill in there. Normally, if you're in Pikachu, you have to stay in for 28 days. I was out within 48 hours of the whole thing. So I was out of Pikachu within 24 hours because I'd already spent a previous 24 hours in the larger ward. And clearly the chief psychiatrist could see that there was nothing wrong with me, that I had organised thoughts, that they just needed to see that this was always me. That I didn't one day just decide, look at the internet and download information and go, oh, the CIA's coming to get me, you know?
Yeah.
No, I have been in a negotiation, and you'll see that in this file here. And I did steal one of the documents off that. So in this file here, FSD encrypted comms and the CIA kill order, that's me in a negotiation with a guy who was working directly under former Director of Central Intelligence, Leon Panetta. And then the same guy I'm speaking to in this conversation is ordering an assassination in that conversation there that I stole off their system before I deleted it off my hard drive.
Was that M?
M. Yes, M. He called himself M.
Yeah, okay. So you know who this guy actually is?
No.
Okay.
I don't know who he is. All I know is that he worked for Leon Panetta.
Okay, yeah. And didn't Panetta, I recall you mentioning that Panetta approached you at some point in time to help deal with the mysterious vanishing 15 trillion, yeah?
Yeah, so Panetta didn't approach me, but M did through Panetta. And when you listen to that conversation, these guys are CIA, and we know that because Marlon McCall, whose passport is in the CIA folder, and who I just left a message for the other day, because the same intelligence agent that gave me the dead body of Wilfredo Serene this week also gave me the username and email address of Marlon McCall. So I left a lovely little message for Marlon McCall. I've been leaving lovely little messages for everyone lately.
You've been very thoughtful, mate. I've seen your handiwork. You're very thoughtful.
They're very kind too, aren't they?
I like your wording. It really just speaks to people's hearts, I think.
Well, see, this is the beauty of having the moral high ground. And I don't say that because I feel I'm morally superior to the common man or woman. I'm not. I'm an everyday person. I try my best. I'm me. But I do live a clean life because I love my woman, and the love of a good woman, as you know, bro, is one of the most ennobling things that a man can have.
Yeah.
And so I live honorably. But in saying that, when I say moral high ground, I just mean that I'm not a raging, psychopathic, cocaine-dealing, genocidal maniac.
Yeah, so saying that you have the moral high ground over these people isn't actually saying much, but it's helpful to clarify that, you know,
yes.
I mean, the average person on the street doesn't have a friggin' clue about the psychology of the kind of people that you're dealing with here.
No, they don't. And I think we've gotten to a point with InsigniaGate where now I've created, and this is the genius of the position, as much as I don't have several million views yet, I believe that it's inevitable that it'll come.
Yeah.
Because I've created an untouchable, apart from trying to assassinate me, which I don't believe will happen for reasons I won't go into on this broadcast. But I believe, apart from assassination, I've actually created an untouchable position for myself legally and in terms of the law. And I've already proved that through on a number of occasions. Well, one, at the hospital when I was out within 48 hours. But also, two, you know, I was speeding down in New South Wales the other day, and they sent me an enforcement notice, and then they kept calling. And I just sent them the 5-star trust stuff, and the Australian government have been waging, you know, supporting terrorists in Raqqa. And a bunch of things where the Australian government hadn't responded to me. And I said, look, I will not, like under Criminal Code Act of 1995, it's illegal for me under your legislation to cooperate and finance terrorism. And because I can prove in my case that's sitting before the magistrate's court that your entity is a terrorist entity, I'd actually be breaking Australian legislative law and a number of laws if I paid you this fine. They've gone away.
Mm.
They go away, people do. And they pretend I don't exist. So that's the situation I'm in. I'm in the situation where the international community, most of them know who I am by now.
Yeah.
I'm very well known. You know, Barack Obama's lawyer, Jeff Berman, I've been in email contact with him. Like, people know me. But they pretend I don't exist. But now that's getting difficult the more that InsigniaGate and the information is starting to take on a life of its own, because now it's not mine, it's out there in the World Wide Web, and people are actually using it as their own ammunition. You know, it's being dropped in live feeds with President Trump talking today. There's Reddit threads about it. There's some awesome comments on 4chan, and people are really getting it. More than the engagement I had on Facebook, which is wonderful because, you know, you and I connected there and we've made great relationships there, but Facebook very much is an echo chamber, and a very censored one at that, which is why I'm very happy to be speaking on Truth with you tonight, because, you know, here we have a platform that isn't censored and that is bringing people who genuinely want to work to make change, not only on the platform, but actually out there in the world. So, you know, we're getting there.
One step at a time, bro. One foot in front of the other, eh? I'm just looking down my list here quickly because I wrote a whole bunch of points down where I was like, okay, we should touch on this. We should touch on this. You did want to talk a bit about Chris Van Kooteren. Where does he fit into this?
Excellent. So there's this guy on Facebook called Mahal Rockefeller, and I saw him back in 2009, and he looked fake to me, to be perfectly honest. Just like Supreme David Rockefeller looked fake, turns out he was fake. So there was this whole phenomena where these people would come on Facebook and pretend to be Rockefellers. Now, the difference with Mahal is it turns out he is an actual Rockefeller. Now, I know that because the same guy who introduced me to the right channels that got me to the presidency of the Congo actually knows Mahal. So he knows Mahal personally, has met Mahal, and it turns out Mahal is some sort of adopted Rockefeller. I don't know whether it's by marriage or he's a minor Rockefeller. But he pretends to be the prince of the Illuminati, which is really quite strange. So if you just looked at Mahal's Facebook, you'd think this guy's a LARP, which is live action role play, which I call him all the time because he is to a degree. But the strange thing is, if Mahal was just a LARP, why is his handler John Ritchie? Now we know John Ritchie is CIA because my contact used to work in the White House for 6 years. So he knows of John from his time in the White House, and he knows that John Ritchie is CIA. Mm-hmm. So why is a CIA handler working with a guy who's pretending to be the prince of the Illuminati? Okay, that to me is weird. So this was my conversation with those guys. And now I was just on the phone to Mahal because he was harassing my friend. And so I started harassing Mahal because I didn't want him to harass my friend. And when I was harassing him, he got scared. So he brought Clancy on the phone. He called me back with Clancy, hoping to scare me. And anyone who would like to hear that conversation, it actually is quite funny. And many people have re-uploaded it to YouTube now. And it is quite funny because I've had a couple of beers, maybe 3 or 4. I said 2 or 3, but I'd had a few because it was State of Origin night. I wasn't drunk, but I was happy. I was merry. And Clancy calls back and he tries to security clear me. And by all intents and purposes, I mean, this guy sounds bona fide CIA. And I would believe he is CIA because John Ritchie is CIA and Mahal knows CIA. And the things they knew and talked about the 5-Star Trust. So then right at the end of the call after I'm making fun of Clancy, I'd pretty much call the call me making fun of Clancy. Who knows where Clancy is now, but geez, I've called him out over the last few weeks. And then right at the end of the call, Mahal brings a guy onto the phone called Chris Van Kooteren. Mm-hmm. Now, the Van Kooteren family is a very sort of wealthy, well-to-do, high socialite US family. Because of that, they're friends with the Bush family. And Chris admits to the secret societies and the 5-Star Trust without me even having to push him too much. I don't know why they did that. But then I got that recorded and then I put it on the internet and anyone can hear it if they like. and they can hear InsigniaGate drop. And then so obviously when Bush wasn't responding to me on Twitter, and this is Bush Senior, and nobody's responding to me, I just decided to call Mahal up again and reach Chris Van Kooteren and start trolling Chris to tell him to give this document to, or these documents to the Bush family. So I would say it would be strange that these documents haven't personally already been given to the Bush family, considering the amount of pressure, heat, and stress I'm putting on that entire CIA, operation at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, and I have listened to that, the Clancy call twice now, actually. And it's interesting to go back and hear it again and pick up things that, because I've since read or listened to other things and contextualize them and get, it's very bizarre that they said those things to, was it Van Kooteren who actually said the words, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but I remember someone admitted that they had control, and there was like, they were speaking on behalf of the CIA. They were like, yes, we control the 5-star accounts.
Yeah, the accounts and that. Yeah, that was Clancy. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wherever you are, we are, and we're within so many miles of you, and we control the world, basically, is what he was saying. Because this is at a very high level of security clearance, because we're talking majestic clearance, which is well above the president. And so basically I stumbled into the guys that I know are part of the elite, super secret, supra secret families that control the collateral accounts. And so because of that, I've just started to troll them like any good internet junkie. Actually, it's Lord James.
Oh, wow, here we go.
Hello, Lord James. Yes, hello, Lord James.
Yeah, I haven't a clue what's going on, so I can't understand anything about what you're saying to me because I haven't a clue what's going on. Nobody talks to me.
Well, I need to talk to you, that's why.
Well, you tell me what's happening, for Christ's sake.
Okay, good. Well, the fix is in, sir. There's only really a few months left of this before it boils over.
I'm not hearing you very clearly. Sorry.
Okay, so you know Wilfredo Serin?
No, I've never heard of him.
You know Serin?
You said I don't know, who is he? I've never heard of him.
You said Serin used to be giving you the intel.
Not with that name, he didn't. Who was he?
You didn't know Wilfredo?
He didn't what?
You didn't know Wilfredo Serin? Which name did you know him by? Indonesian.
No, the one you mean is hold on, I'll get it in a minute.
Not Riyadi.
Yeah, Rayani. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's Marlon McCall as well. I'm pretty sure, and I'll go back through my emails, that you'd mentioned Serin some time ago to me back in 2011.
Yeah, but I knew him as the guy I knew, who I was getting the info from, was memory. Hold on. I can't get it off the top of my head.
No, that's all right. Look, the main thing is that we've established communication now, and that this has gotten very serious. So I would have...
He's dead, is he?
He's dead, sir. He was murdered. I tried to call... When I couldn't reach you, let me explain to you how serious, Lord James. When I couldn't reach you for the last few weeks, I tried to get in touch with parliamentary security to check that you were okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they're starting to take people out now who are close to this. So I'm not saying you should be paranoid. I'm just saying you should be more careful and advise people who look after you about the security situation around you at the moment.
Well, I can't do much more than I've got. I just go and I come and I sit in the House of Lords all day, and then I go home and then come back and do it all again. Alfred, no, I'm trying to get this guy's name. It was, I know the one you mean now, but it was the same as one of the Saudi Arabian cities.
All right, yep. I don't know, but there was Marlon McCall as well. You're in touch with McCall.
I have no contact with him for 7 years. He's the one I dealt with while I was in Bangkok, but I have had no contact with him for 7 years.
Okay. All right. Well, the main thing is that you became aware of those funds and that you met people who connected to those funds, and that we're at a point now where there'll be official interests, we hope, wanting to investigate those funds. You said to me the last time we spoke, which was about 6 months ago, to bring you the smoking gun. And
but I've heard nothing. All I've heard from one source is that there has been a very serious discussion going on between China and America, which the British would like to be involved with, as to the distribution of the resources of the old Dragon family funds.
Yeah.
And that is all I know. But as I understand it, that is a subject of international court and criminal proceedings at the present time. And it's not making any progress, which is any use to Britain.
Yeah, exactly. None of this has ever made any progress because it ties back to a lot of dirty laundry that vested interests don't want out. Now, the difference we have at the moment is that President Donald Trump is in office, and he is not anybody's fool, and he's not playing someone else's narrative to the best of our knowledge. I have had conversations with NSA, and we believe that the time is ripe to be able to progress this forward, and I've folders to that effect. Now, I sent those folders along with the fact that you and I had had discussions to British intelligence at Vauxhall Cross last night. So I would suggest, sir, that you go and speak. I'm going to email you tonight, and I would suggest that you go and speak to British intelligence, to your people, ASAP.
Hold on. Did you say they're going to email me today?
I'm going to email you the information that I sent to British intelligence last night. Now, I'm doing this just so you're aware as well, because I respect you. I'm doing this in a very public way at the moment. And I'm doing this with you as a public official. Okay? So, on the basis of that, I have informed them of my relationship with you, because one of the problems with these monies and the situation has been the rampant secrecy. So the only way we can combat that is by going completely public. And I've dropped this on 8chan, where this Q phenomena is dropping. This is now starting to go viral, and the necessary momentum is building to have a full-blown international investigation and prosecution into the individuals like President George H.W. Bush.
That was the name I knew him as.
Yeah, there was a Rayadi, but way back when, I remember in 2011, you'd mentioned a Wilfredo Serin. So I'll try and... I don't
remember that one. The other name I just mentioned, yes, that was the name that was always there.
Yeah. Now...
Rayadi.
Yeah. So the thing at the moment, sir, is that I've got a line of communication with you. Because Serin has just been assassinated in the last couple of weeks, and because we are pushing... Do you
mean Alfredo Rayadi, though? Is that the man? He's been murdered?
No, different guy, Rayadi. Unless he took a different name, unless Rayadi was Serin, which I'd have to confirm. It was...
Rayadi is the man Brian, the man who signed the deal with Alan
Greenspan
on behalf of the Federal Reserve Bank of the USA for the release of all the gold he controlled. That was where his name came in. And he is the only one I've had direct discussions with, because he put me in touch with the Bank of Malaysia.
Yeah. And because this is important for the public record, particularly when we go to, give testimony and evidence about this in either a royal commission or a congressional hearing or an international tribunal. What is the thing, sir, that convinced you that this is real and not a scam?
Not really convinced, but the only time I had any evidence provided to me was when John Woods brought to England a contingent of Koreans who claimed to be acting on behalf of these people with a view to replacing and repositioning the gold bullion which they were controlling on behalf of the Dagon families. Got it.
And I'm appreciative of your position because of the difficulties you've had. Could you just recap for the record as well? Remember when Obama and Cameron were meeting in 2011 when we were having discussions?
Yeah, but I never had any contact with Cameron or Obama on the subject at all.
No, I knew you didn't.
I've ever had from that direction was when Black Eagle, or whatever his name is.
Well, I introduced you. I introduced you to Black Eagle, yes. However, remember the next morning after Strathclyde and Cameron met, sorry, not Strathclyde and Cameron, Cameron and Obama, you were called into an urgent meeting, were you, in the morning with Strathclyde and the boss of the Parliamentary Ethics Committee?
Yeah, that was with Strathclyde. Strathclyde's now out of office in the House of Lords for 7 years now, 8 years.
He has, but what did Strathclyde tell you about these funds? What did they want you to do?
They didn't tell me a thing. They told me it was all a load of rubbish and I should forget about it and stop being a nuisance.
Yeah, but then you said two things to me when you called after that meeting. First, they said this was nothing more than an Ivory Coast scam and you should forget about it because you're embarrassing yourself and Parliament.
Absolutely right.
And then when you insisted that you would continue to investigate it, you told me, and this is based off my memory, they said to you that you were interfering in the highest level of British national security since World War II. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do indeed. It was not only said to me, it was said to other people.
And my point to you, sir, was always, how could an Ivory Coast scam have anything to do with British national security? It can either be one or the other. So wouldn't that lead you to believe that this actually was real and thus why the security concerns?
Well, I don't know, because the only thing I've ever known is that I had what I thought was incontrovertible evidence of the transfer of 15 trillion in funds to the United Kingdom, which then did not appear to go into any area that was accepting responsibility for the money, and I was concerned as to what this money was for and what basis it was held on. Because if you want to bankrupt, if you want to destroy a country today, you don't nuke them, you lend them £5 billion and ask for it to be paid back.
Yep. Economic hitman.
And that's where I came in, and almost where I left off. They stopped talking to me, and I've done everything I could, and I haven't had any active participation in this for 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
I don't even talk to John Woods any longer.
Yeah, and as you remember, it was me that introduced you to John Woods when I left the UK.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know what he's up to now.
No, me either. I didn't really know him well. I just knew that I had to leave your side and I needed to give you a replacement. So John Woods came along and he was the best candidate at the time. Sir, you've been really helpful. I am in your corner. I am in your camp. I think you know that.
I'll help. I'll do anything I can to help anybody on this, but I'm strictly limited. It was Johannes Riardi. Johannes Riardi. Johannes Riardi.
Yeah. Look, his name comes on the Federal Reserve website as a scam artist, but we have intel.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
His name comes up on the Federal Reserve website to suggest that it was a big scam.
Yeah.
However,
is he
We don't know. But what we know is that Wilfredo Serin was a key player along with Marlon McCall, and he was assassinated a couple of weeks ago. Thus, my concern for you, because from memory, and I'm pretty sure I've got it in emails that you and I have together, you had mentioned Wilfredo to me on a number of occasions back in 2011. I know that was a long time ago.
I mentioned Johannes Liardi, but I do not remember Sarin ever at any time.
That's all right. I'll join those dots. Now that you've said that, I'll look into that and see where that came from in our relationship. My request to you, sir, would be that you go and contact the contacts you have with British intelligence, and you tell them that someone close to the collateral accounts has been assassinated, that was investigating the 15 trillion, and that you would like to get official oversight over the information I'm about to email you.
Well, I don't think I can do that, because I was told very emphatic to sever all connections with MI6, and that came to me from within the House of Lords, and I cannot override that instruction. So I don't even have the name or phone number of an individual at MI6 who is aware of this any longer. I used to be able to pick up a phone and talk to people I knew, but I don't have any such people any longer.
Yeah, they're probably all doing their rainbow training anyway, Lord.
I don't know, but anyway. My own secretary used to be an ex-Miss Honeypenny.
Yeah.
And she's died. She died of natural causes of heart failure 8 years ago, and so I don't even have her to get me a connection.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Look, we're working on it. As long as I can pick up the phone and we can have relatively fluid communication. You asked me 6 months ago for a smoking gun, and I've delivered it. Wonderful. Thank you, Lord James. I believe you're key to this, and this is starting to open up exponentially now as a result of the work that I put forward at your request, largely when you asked for a smoking gun.
I'm ready and willing when they want. Okay,
bless you. Bye. Bless your heart, sir. You're a good man.
Wow. That went well.
Well, debunk that.
Are you sure that wasn't a LARP on the end of the line?
Yeah, it was my granddad's gardener. I just timed it, you know.
He does a great impression. Amazing.
He's amazing.
Well, that was great. That was great that we worked that in right smack bang in the middle of our chat.
Yeah. The only reason, and I actually love Lord James, he's a friend, but he's something more. The only reason I record Lord James is because he is a public official. He takes public money from the public purse to do his job. And as a result, because this is a public inquiry, I'm doing this publicly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine if we could put that if we had that kind of access and pressure to be applied to everyone else who is relevant here, who's in a position that, you know, they should be acting and they're not, they're sitting on their hands. I mean, he actually sounds like a decent human.
He's lovely. No, that's why he made such great ground, because he wouldn't be bought or sold. And now I think the key point in all of this, as much as I couldn't ever fathom why Lord James couldn't wrap his head around it, he always thought, because he's a bit old school, you know, I think it's a different era. He still thought, it still could be a scam. Well, in some way it was. It is a scam. But it's not the scam they're saying it is. It's a real scam. They're scamming us. Mm. But what he also confirmed, for the record on this interview, was that Strathclyde said, and I didn't like to lead him, but clearly he's an older man, so I'm having to lead him a little bit, but he's still confirming, and he's in the House of Lords, so he's shrewd. He's not going to, like I tried to lead him to Wilfredo Serin, no knowledge. So it's not like he was just agreeing with me because I was leading him.
Yeah.
So he didn't agree with me on Serin, which my memory says he was one of Lord James's providers, but I'm going to need to dig into my records and try and find a connection there. And then I was saying, well, look, you had a meeting with Strathclyde. He said, yes, I did. And I said, did they say it was an Ivory Coast scam? He said, they were the exact words. And then I said, did they also say it was a national security? He said, yes. So this is the one thing I've been saying to everyone all this time. And he's just been live here with you confirming that. This is a significant development in real time while we're talking, which I think is absolutely fantastic, brother.
Oh, amen. I mean, and it just goes to show that this whole thing, this whole tapestry of activity is live and evolving as we're speaking. I mean, you know, you were just evolving it a little bit.
Yes, exactly. And as I said, this isn't just a drop, this is a live op. And it's so live that Lord James called me while we were talking. And finally, this is a bit of a vindication for me because, you know, I was thrown in a hospital, bro. You know? And I have had a hard, difficult journey with this. And so for me, this is a really significant time of my life because, you know, my beautiful woman and I, we've been doing ceremony lately, you know, in a good way. And there's been some really significant progress that we've been making spiritually in our own lives and also fundamentally in this work. And it's really running parallel. If anyone just looks at some of the art we're putting out lately, we were on Wollumben for a sunrise ceremony, just the two of us the other morning, and it was beautiful. And that was a huge cycle for me because all this started on Wollumben in 2003 going into 2004. That New Year's I was up Wollumben, and it was the whole start of this journey, even though it started a bit before. Or it was a type of thing. So, you know, and it is an emotional subject because I have had to sacrifice a lot by remaining in my truth. Not that it was my decision. You know, I had people make decisions around me which were really unfair as a result of me choosing to do something that I wouldn't allow my children to have to do. If I don't do it, well, that's me neglecting them as far as I was concerned. The world is sick and it will only get worse if people like me don't do this because then we're just letting the enemy win. So it's been a huge issue. And, you know, I'm quite satisfied at the moment because this live op and InsigniaGate is very much starting to become, you know, my vindication, as it were.
Yeah.
Because I've been called mentally ill by so many people.
Yeah. So
many people. Simply because they weren't smart enough to even begin to appreciate how long. I mean, you get a degree in 4 years, you get a PhD in 8 years, I think it is. I've been doing this for over 10 years. Mm-hmm. So if you speak to a quantum physicist who's got a PhD and has been doing this for over 10 years, and he begins to tell you about string theory and mathematics and formulas at that level, and just because you don't understand him or her, you call them crazy? Okay, now I realize that there are a lot of string theory people and quantum physicists in the world, so that's an accepted profession. Well, I also realize that if I did the same thing everyone did, where there was no solution coming out of the universities, there was no solution coming out of our sciences, there was no solution coming out of our industries, why would I go and do the same thing they're doing if they're not offering a solution to hunger, to fuel poverty, to war, to scarcity? We all had to do something different, and that's why we're talking, because we're both on that path, and our families are on that path, and our friends are on that path by large to a degree, and it is a slightly alternative path, but we all do realize that there needs to be a something else. Unfortunately, my something else was, you know, so high level and detailed and scary because I was facing off against the CIA that it scared the people around me and they took my children. So my motivation, if anyone asks me why I'm doing this, yeah, I want to fix the place. But why have I gone so hard and so fearlessly full on into the Hell's Kitchen is because the only way I get my kids back fair and square and am vindicated as a father is to succeed in what I've started and finish it. Mm. And so nothing will stop me. They can try and kill me. They can try and imprison me. They can try.
Well, I mean, you've done such a good job of putting them in the shit at this point, like strategically. I mean, they're just, you know, persecuting you. And the more they delay it and the more they try to do it as time unfolds, the more obvious it is that it's like a political persecution, that it's not a legitimate thing. You've already demonstrated that the psychiatrists are more delusional than you are.
Yeah.
So what do they do now? I mean, I don't see a ready solution for these guys.
That's the thing. I think they've got a workshop now called, you know, Eliahi Day. And everyone has to attend the Eliahi workshop to workshop how to deal with me if I call. Basically, the standing order now is I can't call the government. I'm not allowed to. So I got a letter and I'm not allowed to write. I can't. The doctors have told me I'm not allowed to communicate with the Australian government. And I agreed. I said, look, if that's what you really want, clearly they've got an issue with me talking to them, I'll stop communicating. So I got this letter the other day because I didn't vote and they want money. Well, if I send them a letter with money, I'm communicating with them. So I can't communicate with my government at all because they're too afraid. And then the little sort of trick I've done on them, you know, they wanted to every now and then just check that I wasn't communicating with the government. So then I just stopped talking to them. And just like when I communicated with the government and they refused to talk to me, so I kept calling and they refused to talk to me, so I kept calling. Now I'm refusing to talk to them, so they keep calling. So I'm now teaching them the exact reason why I had to keep calling was because they weren't available. And now I'm not available, they keep calling. Now they're becoming the fixated threat on me.
They do sound a little bit fixated. I think they should.
They're a bit fixated.
Yeah, a bit obsessed by you, actually.
I know.
They've really taken it hard, you not talking to them. They're not handling it well.
They did. They put a little note under my door. I never put a note on a door.
Wow. I
mean, I mailed them stuff, but I never came to their door and put a note under it. I mean, that's freaky.
Yeah.
That's stalker level freaky.
Yeah, you've got problems, government. You've got issues.
Stalker. Stalkers, bro.
I love it. Well, you're obviously not the fixated one, mate. She's a good lass.
Big shout out to Elle Shepherd as well. It takes a special and a certain kind of lady to do what she does with me, or just to be with someone like me.
Mm.
I've seen what happens. You know, it's not the white picket fence. And
do you mind?
The background noise. I've seen the white picket fence and it doesn't work, and women usually tend to want to steer into the safety comfort zone, which I appreciate, but there's also a little bit of a demasculation or emasculation of man happening. Yeah. There is a bit of a balance, and Elle really fluidly honours that balance, and we've got an incredible relationship where we're thriving in circumstances. You know, usually this thing once a lifetime would be enough one day for someone, and we live and breathe this type of work. And, you know, threats and little death threat the other day, and police at the door, and ASIO, and I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. So, you know, I'm
full credit to her.
Full credit to Elle for having the courage to stand up to it and be an incredible, you know, business partner, as well as incredible romantic partner and wife.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. She's a powerhouse. I love you guys. You guys are you've got you've got that thing, that X factor that, you know, most couples wish they had, mate, and you've got it. You guys are a very strong couple.
Thank you. And I know that that's coming from experience, because there's probably not another couple on the internet like the two of you as well, who have been promoting this at your own ends, power humanity forward, not just for yourselves either. And you've been doing an incredible job. So shout out to the ladies.
That's it. Shout out to the ladies. There you go. All right. I love it. I wanted to ask you, and this may be trivial, but what is the significance of the name you've given this, InsigniaGate? Why InsigniaGate?
The first letter I wrote, so my team gave it the name InsigniaGate because I rebranded the folder, because the Dropbox folder used to be called CIA 5-Star Trust ASIO something. And I went, I'm going to change it because I'm using their branding. I don't like their branding.
Not very marketable.
No. So I'm going to change it, and I called it the Insignia Project. And so as the team decided, well, let's make this go more public, as is happening, they called it InsigniaGate in the same vein of Watergate and, you know, Pedogate, which has come out lately, which we won't discuss, I don't think, on this one. But it is there, and I would encourage people to check out Fiona Barnett and Isaac Cappy. The two of them I'm going to do a big shout out to, and they are doing an incredible job in that pretty heinous arena. And it does need to be talked about, and it does need to be discussed, but it is a very separate subject to this one, albeit interconnected. However, you know, I don't think we have time for that. It's too deep a rabbit hole. But if anyone wants to know about that, Isaac Cappy's doing great work. He's been in a few pretty big-name Hollywood films, and he just outed Steven Spielberg and a couple of others. So I'm in contact with Isaac. I love him. He's a brother. And I endorse him and what he says 100%. I've seen by his actions, not just his words, his actions, with me in our friendship, that he is an honourable and generous and respectful legend. So big shout out to Isaac. And Fiona I've also spoken to. Hyper intelligent woman. Any woman that intelligent doesn't need to be making up stories. Simple as that. And the insignia, because it was mine, it was like I was finally putting my initials on all the hard work I'd done. Little did I know all the way back then in 2007 that I'd still be going in 2018, developing this even further forward. I did have a 6-year retirement for family reasons in that time. I just was in a situation where I couldn't do this work. Toxic relationship, narcissistic, highly controlling, and I would advise anyone in that type of relationship to extract themselves yesterday. But it is what it is, and it gave me a break away from it. But at the same time, I was always, it was like taking the guitar away from Jimi Hendrix. You know, I'm here to do this. I'm good at this. This is what I do. This is what I know. And so for me to try and do anything else, I was quite happy to, for the sake of peace. But, you know, I needed to do this. And so years later, I changed the folder back to the Insignia Project. And again, it's all about me just putting my initials on 10 years of my work, because this wouldn't have come along if I didn't dedicate to it. And I haven't been paid for this. This isn't something I get money for. And this is something that I don't just do as a hobby. This is something that I've put thousands of hours into, more than thousands. It's unquantifiable, effectively. And the pain and grief that's come as a result isn't, you know, anyone's cup of tea. So, you know, it takes everything from you. Edward Snowden's in Russia. He can't go home. Julian Assange is in Ecuador embassy in London. He can't leave. And I can't see my kids. So we all have something that's taken as a result of making this stand. one of the good things I have is that the information I have is so dangerous. If they engaged with me, it's almost like they're admitting that it's real. So they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. So it's an interesting phenomena around who I am and the work that I do at the moment, given the fact that one man is seen to be able to be powerful enough to stand against the most powerful agencies in the world. And that's not me boasting.
No.
That's actually just the sober, honest observation of my life.
Exactly.
They're not responding. They're not coming against me. No one's coming to the door. I mean, they do try occasionally, but they're not winning.
What have you, actually, you mentioned Assange's name, and in one of your drops recently, I saw there's a plan to free Julian. Is that something you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I had a wonderful lady named Karen who heads up the Western Australian WikiLeaks party, and she saw me getting dragged off, and then she looked into all of my videos and stuff, and she went, holy, wow, okay, this guy's onto it. And so I started speaking to her and having good conversations, and then obviously through the WikiLeaks network, Julian's position strategically is a very important one. And so I also realized that what Julian and I are fighting for are exactly the same thing. And so I ended up speaking to Julian Assange's father a few times now and discussing, what we can do by collaboration that would help Julian. And so in terms of the rebranding of what we're doing, it's not that I'm using Julian, because I'm not. Because one of the things that will happen as a result of the success of this is freeing Julian Assange. Because I spoke to Julian's dad and it was around Father's Day, and I knew how, as a father, I could feel, Mr. Shipton's pain. I also sort of committed to, right, well, let's sort Julian out because nobody is.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, mate. I was just going to ask you, in doing what you're doing and pushing it forward and getting the results and the progress out of it, how does that connect into his situation and change it?
Well, his enemies are the Department of Justice and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the CIA. So at the moment, they're claiming the moral high ground. They're like, well, you released information that was important to our national security, and so you breached our national security, and you're just a little journalist, and we want you to come over and front, our courts because you're a little nuisance maker. Well, we turn the tables and say, well, your former president's a coke dealer. Your whole CIA's been keeping this secret. The entire Australian government in the last 2 years has been keeping this secret. Every single major agency in the world has been keeping this secret. They no longer have the moral high ground. We then turn the tables back on them and say, well, no, sorry, we don't have to listen to cocaine dealers. You are cocaine dealers, nothing more. You are little low-level criminal cocaine dealers. And not only that, you're little secret society sex parties. Why should we do anything you tell us to? In fact, you people need to be fronting an international war court yesterday. And I will tell you, there is very positive movement from international judges that are mandated for the war tribunals that are all moving forward into a new narrative as we speak.
Oh, okay.
So there is a shift. The tide not only is turning, in my books, the tide has turned. All we're just seeing is the progress away from the echo chamber that they used to have power. And having to do it in such a way that human collect consciousness doesn't have a psychiatric episode because, Steven Spielberg was abusing children. We've always been taught of the magic of Disney. So haven't films been this beautiful escapism?
Mm.
We've escaped from our ordinary mundane lives, and they've captured us. When do we sit for 2 hours without blinking, without looking at a cinema screen? Magic of cinema. So the magic of Hollywood. And they took that magic, and you see all their symbols and they're this and they're that, and they fall in love with them. They really did. Our favorite actors, we fell in love. We wanted to see them in the next film, big money. They did it. But in them teaching us that that's the magic, that escapism is the magic, and that we had to watch them to get this sense of courage and drama and valor and all of the things that sometimes movies invoke emotions in us that we wouldn't get in our ordinary lives.
Mm.
And meanwhile, these people were alleged child abusers and rapists.
Mm.
I mean, how sick, twisted, and disgusting. Meanwhile, the magic that I'm talking about is that we can have not only a device in our home that will power it for free forever, or until the parts wear down and then we replace them, but we can have a vehicle that sits in our driveway that takes us wherever we want on the planet for free without needing to drive on wheels.
Mm.
Okay, so let's reclaim a little bit of magic that's been taken from us because we have been treated like human children. You only have to look at how they market their products to us in those diddy little cheesy jingles on TV to hear how insanely childish they think we are. And they've become. And so all my call out is to the adults in the world, the men and the women who seek to have reasonable, logical, factual, accountable discussions, and that we can begin to spread an adult, reasonable, factual, accountable dialogue around the world. And that's
Be amazing.
That's the process InsigniaGate.
Yeah. I love the ethos. And that's the thing. I mean, a project like this, of this nature, that's so out of the box and that posits so many unpalatable, unstomachable things. I mean, it's meeting this wall of infantile resistance, and the only way that we can push it forward is going to be gradually. It's inevitably, it's going to be a pain. We're going to be tearing our hair out. It's going to be slow, hard work, because while we're trying to get the truth out, we are having to actually grow up the human race so out of this infantile state we've been engineered to be in, so that we can actually start dealing with reality.
Yeah, which isn't altogether pleasant, but we have to deal with it because it's going to be way more awesome if we do.
Well, I want my personal UFO.
If you don't have anything to deal with, you need to take a trip to the third world and get back to me.
Yeah.
You know? And I always love using the metaphor, and you've probably heard me use it before, but I always love to go back to the Leonardo DiCaprio film, The Beach, where they find this idyllic paradise. And it's perfect, and they don't want to tell anyone about it because then it's not their own paradise and it'll get taken away. And so at some point, this poor fella gets his leg bitten off by a shark. And they all vote that don't take the guy back to hospital, otherwise their idyllic paradise won't be theirs anymore. So they have him in their environment, and his groans tend to really drown out the fun vibe. And so they drag him over to the back end of the beach where they can't hear him suffer, so they can go back to playing their beach volleyball. That is the West. And the guy with his leg bitten off by a shark is third world. Mm-hmm. As long as we can't hear it or see it or hear it suffering, it's okay. The world's pretty good. There's democracy.
Yeah.
We've got Coke and the state of origin.
Yeah, you can watch the origin on your big fuck off TV. I mean,
and don't get me wrong, I don't mind watching the origin on my big fuck off TV, but a bit of balance, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's a difference between that escapism, that pathological escapism, versus simply having a bit of time to decompress and enjoy yourself once in a while.
Absolutely, which we don't do that often. I mean, I enjoy the work, so it's fine, but we're pretty much doing it every day. I mean, we will sit down to have a bit of time off in the evenings, but it's marginal compared to the workload, because there's always so much to do at the moment. And to all those who are doing it as well, that are out there listening, and even just to those who are listening to this at the moment, we thank you. You know, because the world changes slowly. That's the fight we're in, you know. You can get all back down from CIA, 5-star trust, and anti-gravity and UFOs, and really at the end of the day, it's just about a corrupt group of people putting down the rest of the planet. That's it. That's as simple as it is. And they've been doing it for generations. You know, they did it. They sent people to war, and they just, everybody knows this. But we haven't had the tools to make an effective major change of it. And this is where it's one of the things that the alchemist told me. I was speaking earlier when he said, you know, it's the delivery system is the thing that's the problem. He one day said to me on the same phone call it was, in fact, he said, it's actually a game of economic conquest. That's why no one's won this. Because you can have the best idea, the best platform, and the best message. You might even have $10 million. But $10 million for a good project with an awesome message is chump change to these collateral unlimited accounts. So the only way to win this game of economic conquest, and it is strategic military economic conquest, is to actually take down the CIA 5-star trust. And that I believe is the crucible and perennial issue for me. Because if you can get accountability around that, that opens up all the rest and every single other issue and every single other symptom in relationship to that one issue. So rather than going around putting out little fires, you're going around and actually and addressing symptoms, you're going and addressing the cause. And that's what any good physician or medical practitioner would do.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Priest.
Yeah.